I was there for that whole Summer of Love experience. I discovered a foreign language station that had little bits of music in between the foreign language shows. And late at night, they had a guy doing just 6 hours of music. So I called the station and I went down and visited them, and the all-night guy quit. So I got the all-night show starting in February '67. KMPX was the beta. We were experimenting. We didn't really know what to do, and it was the first station of its kind. We played rock and roll in stereo from albums for grown-ups. Before that, and continuous with that, Top 40 Radio was rock and roll from hit singles for teenagers in mono on AM. So we were definitely diametrically opposed to Top 40 Radio. For me, the working definition of what is hip is not what people might think. It's the search for the authentic experience. That to me is what hip is about. So instead of playing, even then my first radio show, I could play Pat Boone or I could play Little Richard. And I went for Little Richard every time, because to me that was the more authentic experience. I think the best stuff I ever did on the radio was as much, in a way, kind of educational, turning people onto stuff, as it was to entertaining people and say, oh, here's something groovy, you're gonna like this, and play it for them. So that other level of, oh, by the way, here's this thing about Robert Johnson going down to the Crossroads at midnight on a full moon and making a deal with the devil so he could be a better guitar player. Apparently it worked. And then I'd play Crossroads by Johnson, and then I'd play Crossroads by Cream. And people at home said, why did he play that other guy? But eventually, always tried to make that part of what I do. And I also seem to have a knack for what I later came to call spontaneity. That is spontaneous continuity. So I've got a song on the air with a musical background, I know what key it's in. I say, oh, I know a perfect song to go with that. So I do these great segues. And if you were listening at the beginning of the set, you'd still be there at the end of the set, because I had a knack for stringing songs together, thematically, musically, whatever. I sort of invented the rain set. As time went by during that year, we knocked off more of the foreign language shows, and our program director brought in more people, and we were all 24 hours, I think, by the fall of '67. But it took a while. These foreign language guys had, they had contracts that you couldn't break. So people, they've got to picture this. The summer of love, Haight-Ashbury is blooming, all these hippies are coming to San Francisco. Damn that Scott McKenzie and his stupid song. And people would be hanging out listening to the radio, and they'd hear, one of us on the air playing groovy music, and then there'd be a station ID, and then some guy would come on and start talking Chinese. And these people, it blew their minds. They said, is that guy talking Chinese, man, or is it just me? It was some of those golden moments, those transitions. Along with the British invasion, I think the folk rock fusion that Dylan had started and had been picked up on by so many former folkies, like the Byrds and Mamas and Papas and all that, that to me was probably the most important thing that was going on in music in those days. I did an interview with Cream that summer on their first tour, and Felix Pappalardi, who had co-produced their second album, came along with them, and he had tapes of Disraeli Gears. So I did the interview with Cream. I'd met these guys at a promo party, and Graham used to let me hang out backstage at the Fillmore, and I had met these guys and talked with them and stuff. So we did an interview, and I was the first disc jockey in America to play Sunshine of Your Love on the radio. Of course, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, but that's beside the point. Pappalardi left us the tapes, and he wound up getting in trouble with Atco Records, because in those days, if you had a new record coming out, you had to time the release of the single so every top 40 station got the new single at noon on Friday. And he said, you did what? You left the tapes in this hippie radio station? Turns out the album, when it hit the streets, was back ordered like crazy in San Francisco. There were thousands of copies. They said, as soon as that album comes out, I want a copy of that. I heard that on the radio. So then they congratulated him on his brilliant marketing strategy to get the album to move and the album to sale. I grew up listening to these classic old-time disc jockeys. You have a theme song at the beginning of your show. One of my early inspirations was a guy named Bill Anderson. Now, I was going to high school in Hilo, Hawaii, which is where I got my first radio shows while I was still in high school. And my favorite disc jockey was a guy in Honolulu named Bill Anderson. And he had an opening theme. When he'd talk, he had music in the background. He had a little Chet Atkins guitar piece he'd play. He was the hippest guy in the world. And he had that knack of putting himself in the room with you. And I loved this guy. He was a great disc jockey. He left Honolulu, went to California, changed his name to Adam West, and became Batman. So you ever notice one thing about his portrayal of Batman? He had a wonderful, wonderful deep radio voice. It's one thing to see Hot Tuna play, and it's another thing to know where they came from and what that culture was and what it was really all about. It was really an amazing time. So I think that's important to maintain that link with the past. You go in the company store, and all the old Jefferson Airplane stuff has been re-released, and the other San Francisco bands and stuff has been re-released. So I think it's good to have that connection with the past. You know, without any appreciation for the roots of where the music comes from, there's a tendency for pop music to be somewhat shallow and superficial to start with, but maybe with more of that appreciation for the roots, it becomes more meaningful for them. That thread of craziness that we had back with the mothers of invention and Bonzo Dog, with all that stuff, it's still there. There's still that essence of craziness that makes the music so much fun sometimes.